Hello, everyone. My name is Sergio Ramirez. I am the Assistant Dean of Admissions and Student Services at the USC School of Dramatic Arts. I want to welcome you today for our presentation of college financing for parents of artists. This presentation will cover various degree programs that students may want to explore and the funding opportunities for those programs. It will outline particular finances or expenses that come into play with looking at financing higher education, as well as the application process. And then we will go over a sample of a financial package that may help students understand how all these pieces come together in the end. So I want to welcome you, and let's begin with the presentation. Now, when we look at degree programs, there are a number of students who begin this journey post-high school with pursuing a certificate program. Now, a certificate program, when pursuing the arts, these exist typically at smaller institutions or conservatory-style institutions that in some cases are accredited, some are not accredited. The important thing to kind of take note with regards to a certificate program is that these programs typically involve around 2 years of training, and the most important part is whether or not these particular program credits are transferable to an institution. So if a student is exploring wanting to pursue a certificate program, it's really important to understand or to think ahead in terms of what educational journey a student may want to take, because for some certificate programs, these course credits that are taken are not transferable to a four-year institution. So students want to be very clear if they decide to go down this path that either they anticipate a longer educational journey or that this is pretty much where they would like to keep their educational experience. Now, there are a number of students who will pursue a four-year degree, that can be done in two ways. One is a student going to a community college. Now, if we look at a community college only offers associate's degrees or AAs. This experience is a great path for students who are looking to cut down some expenses, meaning they're paying, especially if you're an in-state student here in California, if you want to pursue an associate's degree and want to minimize the financial impact to your family, then an associate's degree is a great path. The thing to keep in mind with respect to pursuing an arts degree is that typically a four-year institution likes to see that majority, if not all, of the courses in that particular arts discipline are taken at the four-year institution. And for many students who want to pursue the arts, they want to start that experience soon. So they start taking classes such as acting, music, film in a community college. You want to be very careful about doing that and work very closely with your academic counselor, because the idea is that students in an associate's are taking classes at a community college. Those classes should really be focusing on general education courses that a student is going to use to transfer to this foreign institution. And then when they get to that four-year institution, they then can explore their arts craft. So we always encourage that students work with their college counselor at the community college to understand what is required to get admitted into a four-year institution. Now, associate's degrees are typically 2 years, but there are some institutions, some private schools that do not necessarily need an associate's degree to transfer in. So for example, students who are interested in pursuing a degree in the arts and wanting to transfer to a private school, they may only need to go to school for a year and not complete the full associates. They may just use that stepping stone at a community college to get into the four-year institution. And in these cases, sometimes it's that students want to make a stronger academic profile to make their application competitive. But for some institutions like a UC system, they do require an AA to be completed before they can transfer in into a 4-year institution. But you'll see that an associate's degree is typically 2 years. Now, in addition, or once the student decides to make the transfer, you'll see that there are Bachelor of Arts programs at 4-year institutions. Bachelor of Arts programs are typically 4-year degree programs. These are great ways for students who are interested in pursuing a degree in the arts, and in many cases are looking to do something else. So that may involve a degree in psychology, or a degree in business, or a degree in a number of other fields. So if a student is looking to have that dual experience, meaning a concentration in the art and pair it with something else, that a BA is a great path for students to do that. Now, these are typically at well, you'll find these at Cal State schools, UC schools, and private schools. So Bachelor of Arts is a great pathway for students if they want to find that kind of balance in terms of their educational journey. But there are many students who pursue the arts who pursue a conservatory style program, and that's where you'll find Bachelor of Fine Arts programs, BFAs. Now, the BFA programs are conservatory style programs, and what that means is that the BFA program is designed to provide a much more concentrated experience for students, and they are usually ensemble based, meaning that there are only so many students in a cohort or a group that is pursuing the degree together. You'll find these in acting programs, you'll find these in dance programs. In music programs, there is what we call a Bachelor of Music, or a BM. Those programs, because music programs in general are usually individual, because you're focusing on your particular instrument and you're working very closely, they still may be cohort based, but they're not as dependent as in the ensemble as you would see in an acting program or in a dance program. But you'll also find Bachelor of Fine Arts programs in fine arts. So when you look at a BFA program, you have to really look at your overall educational experience in terms of how many courses a student wants to take, how much time they want to dedicate to that experience, and then what else they are expected to do. Most BFA programs do have a general education curriculum that a student has to complete, but it just depends on the weight of or the percentage of how many courses in a arts discipline versus how many courses a student's taking in a GE. Now, there's a major misconception that a number of students have, that pursuing a BFA is essential if you want to make it in the arts business. And that actually is not true. At the end of the day, what we always encourage students is that the experience, while valuable, and the curriculum, while very important, it is what you make of it. So resources and opportunities are obviously very key, but the thing to keep in mind is that it's what you put into it, and then what you're going to get is what you're going to get out of it. So when you're looking at these conservatory programs, yes, they provide that concentrated experience, but in no way does it automatically set you up for success in a BFA, that a BA may not, that a BA wouldn't do. So we want to make sure that students really understand that each journey is different, BFA, BM, or BA, but it depends on the type of institution that you're going to, as well as the curriculum and resources and opportunities that are going to define that experience. But at the end of the day, it's also going to be about what you put into those degree programs. Now, if a student pursues an undergraduate degree, so a 4-year institution, or 4-year curriculum, many students stop there and jump into the profession. And that's strongly encouraged that students do that, just because they want to test the waters and get a sense of what this feels like and whether or not this is something they still want to continue. Because like every other degree that exists, they may go through this experience and realize, yes, I want to continue, and this is a path that I want to do for the rest of my life. And some students may realize, you know what, I love this experience. I found a lot of transferable skills, but I don't know if I want to continue in this profession, because I may want to look at other areas. But for those students who want to pursue this degree, or this profession, some students later on down the road or immediately after may want to pursue a graduate degree. And a graduate degree in the arts is an MFA, so a Master of Fine Arts. These programs are typically around 2 to 3 years. These programs are extremely competitive, very much like our BFA process, but the MFA process really kind of creates that level of concentration because a student is not taking GEs like they do at the undergraduate level. They are really only taking classes in that particular discipline. So it's important to understand that when you're looking at this experience, that it provides a heightened sense of training. It is not required, again, to pursue a degree in the arts, but it is a pathway for some students. Now, as you can look, though, as we look through these various educational opportunities, in order to be eligible for an MFA, many students need to have completed a 4-year undergraduate degree, and that would come either in the form of a Bachelor of Fine Arts or a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Music. It is very rare that a student would be eligible to pursue an MFA if they only had an associate's or certificate. In many elite master's programs around the country, that an undergraduate degree is necessary. So just in terms of understanding your educational planning and journey, if a master's of fine art degree is in the realm of possibility or something that a student is exploring, then that is a path. Now, an MFA is also considered in the arts world a terminal degree, meaning that the degree that is the highest that a student would perform, should expect in terms of a performance-based degree. However, there are some students who focus their attention and efforts, who are very involved in the arts, who may pursue a doctorate degree. Now, for many other disciplines, a doctorate degree is a pathway that many would consider the terminal degree, the final point of, or the highest point of education. But when it comes to the arts, a doctorate degree is, number one, a lot of arts programs do not have doctorate degrees, and if they do, they are mainly based on a critical studies perspective. So it's not like you can do a doctorate in acting. Those programs do not exist. If you're doing a doctorate in theater or a doctorate in music or a doctorate in film, it is primarily based on the critical studies aspect of that profession. Whereas if you're looking more at a performance-based degree, either in music, dance, acting, fine arts, all of those degrees are going to be at the MFA level. Okay, so when we look at this educational journey, you can see the variety of degrees that are offered, the time at which these degrees would be completed, but it also gives you a sense of the overall expectation as the cost of these degree programs start to mount. Now, the application process for many degree programs involves two parts. One is the actual application. So you'll see that for many applications, some are free if students are eligible for a fee waiver. So I do encourage, if you want to understand if your eligibility, contact your high school counselor to see if that fee waiver is available. But many application fees go all the way up to about $100 plus. So students want to be able to plan that out, identify schools that they feel really connected to, find programs that they feel would really benefit from, and only submit applications to those programs. Now, in some cases, students may find that they can do a one-all, so maybe applying to the UC system or the Cal State system, where you can apply to multiple programs in a single application. That's obviously an option for many students. Many private schools have their each individual process, but the application process can be rather costly depending on how many institutions a student is considering. Now, given how competitive application in college admissions has become, there are many students who apply to a wide range and a variety of schools. So it's really important that you plan this out, because this is going to be a huge cost related to just applying and getting into an institution. But the other cost specifically for the arts is the actual audition or portfolio review process. Now, there are usually there's usually a supplemental application that is required for an arts program. At USC, for example, every arts school at USC requires a supplemental application, and that usually involves an online portfolio or a live audition. So when you're looking at applications and you're weighing the cost of an application and you're also exploring what is involved in that process, please understand that if you are applying to an arts program, most likely you will be required to do a supplemental application. And in that supplemental, you have to pay very close attention to the details of what is expected of you to to submit a completed application. This may involve, like I said, a live audition or a portfolio review. And there may be several layers to that audition. For some programs, they do a pre-screen, meaning they expect students to upload videos to a website. The faculty will review those videos, and then they will invite a small population of students to do another audition. Now, in those cases, again, when we look at costs, you have to anticipate the cost of the original application, the cost of the supplemental application, any costs related to actually doing the audition. So you have to take into account um, it, attire. You have to take into account any tools necessary, any materials necessary if you're doing a portfolio for a supplemental. But then if you're doing a live audition, the actual travel costs related to that. So for many schools who do live auditions, they don't do auditions in every single city. Luckily, we live in Los Angeles, where a number of students but there are a number of students who apply from all over the world. So we usually schools will only select several major cities in their application review, and then consider students for that process. So it's just important to understand what all of those different elements are related to that audition process, and then kind of create an estimate for what those overall expenses, because they will be quite costly. There are many institutions that offer fee waivers or subsidies to help offset the cost based on your eligibility when you submitted your original application. So if you received a fee waiver through the College Board, and usually institutions will waive the supplemental fee. But even if you get those two application fees waived, the application and the supplemental application, the travel costs are still something that you yourself are responsible for. So it's important to understand that this is not going to be something that can easily be paid for through outside support, that you are going to take on some of these expenses if you want to pursue these degree programs. But there are some ways of offsetting the cost of that. Now, financing higher education. So there are two very popular and typical forms that students submit. The most popular one is the free application for federal student aid, or I should say the most common one. I don't know that it's popular, but the free application for federal student aid. This application is required pretty much of every college in the United States. So it gives each institution creates a portfolio, a financial portfolio of the family, to understand where the family is in terms of their income and assets. And then colleges use this to create a package for students. Now, another common one, but is pretty much only used with private schools, is the CSS profile. And the CSS profile digs a little deeper into a student's financial or a family's financial profile to understand what other expenses or assets that a family has. Now, when we look at resources that are available to students, you'll find that there are state grants that students may be eligible for. This, in California, you may find that you may be eligible for a Cal Grant. So that gives you, if a student's family income falls below a certain amount, that students are then eligible for that Cal Grant, and that helps offset. And if that student goes to school in that state, so if we're using if you live in Los Angeles and you go to school in California and your family makes below a certain amount, they would be eligible to, you may be eligible to, for a Cal Grant if you go to a college in California that accepts Cal Grant. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Then there are federal grants. So you'll find this in the Pell Grant system. The Pell Grants is the same thing that states do, but it's more federal based. So it means that this money is really transferable to institutions all around the United States if a student makes below a certain total amount in income, or if, I'm sorry, a family makes below a certain amount of income. Now, again, the difference between state and federal, it really depends on where the student ends up. Because say, for example, a student is in Los Angeles, goes to school in California, and makes below a certain amount, that they may qualify for both a state and a federal grant. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, either a state or a federal grant. But if a student is from Los Angeles, but goes to school in New York, still makes below a certain amount, they may only be eligible for a federal grant. And the reason why they are not eligible for a state grant in New York is because they are not a New York State resident. So it's really important to understand the difference between these two and the eligibility for these two programs. Now, in addition to this, there are institutional awards. So there are grants that students may be eligible for from an institution. Many of these may involve students' eligibility because of their GPA or family income, or what we are able to assess from the FAFSA and CSS profile. So the institutional aid is aid that you do not have to pay back, just the same way that a state grant, a Cal Grant, or a federal grant, a Pell Grant, that you do not have to pay back. So these are great resources for students to explore if they're looking at financial aid and trying to minimize the overall cost. For many students, though, they may be eligible for loans to help offset that cost. So loans are funds that you do have to pay back, but where the school or the federal government may front a family to help offset the overall expense. There are various types of loans available. It's really important to understand that that this money is money that you have to pay back, and this is where we see students talk about the overall college debt that students are accruing because of those loans that students have to take out. Now, it is also important to understand that there are different types of loans. There are student loans and Parent Plus loans, and there are also federally backed student loans and private loans. What you want to avoid are private loans, because private loans have very, very strict and very, very different repayment programs. So that may cause some problems moving forward, because a private loan typically doesn't follow the flexibility or the income-based programs that are currently now in place to help ease the financial impact once a student graduates. And what I mean by that is that, for example, the federal government has programs like income-based repayment programs that use a student when they graduate after that 4 years of, say, an undergraduate degree. They use the income and they take a percentage of that income to establish what your monthly payment will be. And then they spread it out over so many years. But a private loan may not have that same program and may just give you a fixed amount regardless of your income and expect you to pay. So those are just some things to kind of keep in mind. Now, in addition, there are some institutions that have income-based awards, and these are becoming more and more popular with private schools where their endowments are significant and they're able to offset the cost based on a family's income. So if we use USC for an example, students now who are families that make 80,000 or below will receive a full tuition scholarship, which obviously is a huge bonus for students in the in that bracket, but they still are expected to pay for housing. But because of their eligibility, because of their family income, they are immediately eligible for these awards. You'll see these at institutions like USC, Harvard, Stanford, Yale. So these are great awards for students purely based on a family's household income. So if you do find institutions that have these types of awards, these are wonderful institutions to consider, because it really takes the pressure off of a family, because you know immediately based on your family's income that you would be eligible for that type of aid, and it would really reduce the cost of tuition. Now, when we look at a sample award package, you'll see that, and we're going to use USC tuition as an example, just to give you a sense of what that looks like. So a typical tuition package would involve tuition, so the amount of money that's paid for classes. Fees, so fees usually involve health fees, student programming fees, and various other fees that help offset the operating costs an institution has. You'll see room and board. So room and board is where housing comes in. If a student is living at home, obviously this will not be as much unless you are expected to pay something to your family or whoever you're living with. Books and supplies is something that students need to consider when they're putting together their budget. Personal and miscellaneous. This usually involves any personal expenses related to students' day-to-day life. So maybe if they want to have any spending money, or they need to buy a computer, that's kind of where this comes in. But this number should be very small if the books, room and board, and tuition are already covered. And then transportation, depending on if a student's living on campus or off campus, that their transportation costs. But keep in mind, especially when we look at personal and miscellaneous, that every student is going to have a very different package when it comes to miscellaneous and personal, books and supplies, and transportation, because every student has a different life, and every student has different expectations and responsibilities. So if we look at the tuition, and we look at an example here at USC, because we are a private school, tuition at USC is $53,000. You'll see the various student fees, transportation fees, and that total overall cost is $72,273. But when we look at a sample aid, financial aid package, you will see that this student was eligible for a federal Pell Grant, a scholarship. They received a small number of loans. They received federal work study because of their income, and that's money. Federal work study is money where you get a certain amount, and then the government will help offset that. And then the student received a very, very generous university grant. So when we look at these overall expenses between the scholarship, the federal Pell Grant, and the university grant, the student received roughly around $57,000 to $59,000 in grant aid that they did not have to pay, which left them with just these small loans that they then had to come up with. So what each institution wants to do is to match whatever financial aid package they put together, is to get this number to match this number, because we know this is the real expense that it costs for a student to come. So that's why we do include room and board, transportation. We estimate what these would be, because we know that most students will not have a full-time job where they can pay this. So when we're putting a package together, we want to package them so that we give the closest estimate to make sure that that student will be fine financially. And as you can see in this particular case, a student received a considerable amount of grant aid to help offset the cost of tuition. Now, In this particular case, if you notice that the student was only eligible for the federal Pell Grant because that student did not live in California and did not get a Cal Grant, or was not eligible for a Cal Grant because they were not a California state resident. But if they would have, that would have been additional aid that USC would have calculated to help offset the loan money that a student would have needed to take out. Okay. Um, so I hope this presentation gives you some sense in terms of the different degree programs, the different financial aid opportunities that are available for students, and what a financial aid package would look like. If you do have any questions, I hope to see them in the comments, or you can email me at my contact information, which will be provided, and I'd be more than happy to respond and offer as much feedback or information as I can. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope you found this information helpful, and have a great day.